We've seen how to find the duration of a specific asset and how to find its modified duration as well. Now we're going to take a look at how to find the duration of a portfolio, and it's really pretty easy. The duration of a portfolio is simply going to be a weighted average of the durations of the individual assets in that portfolio. It's going to be weighted by the market value of those specific assets. So let's take a look at an example here. That's on page 6 of your notes for this section. And let me bring that up here. And it's really a pretty simple example here. We have 3 assets in our portfolio. You can think of them as being 3 bonds. And asset number 1 has a market value of $100 million. Now, it's important to note this is not the face value of the bond. This is the market value. This is what it could sell for today. This is the present value of the future cash flows. And that first bond has a duration of 6, or you could say 6 years is okay. And again, we want to remember that duration is not a measurement of time, but it is helpful, at least with that seesaw concept of thinking of it in terms of years. Asset number 2 has a market value of $50 million and has a duration of 10. Asset number 3 has a market value of $30 million and a duration of 12. So that's your portfolio. Now, the market value of the portfolio, of course, you add those 3 together and you get $180 million. The duration of the portfolio is going to be asset number 1's proportion of the market value. So that's going to be 100 million divided by 180 million multiplied by asset 1's duration. Asset number 2, it's going to be its proportion of the market value, 50 million divided by 180 million times its duration, which is 10. And then asset number 3 is going to be 30 million over 180 million times its duration, which is 12. So clearly the weights add up to 1, right? And what this does, you notice, is it puts a stronger weighting on the assets that have a higher market value. So if an asset has a really high duration, but it's just a small part of your portfolio, it's not going to give it's not going to have a big effect on the duration of the portfolio. The assets that will have the biggest effect on the duration of the portfolio are going to be the assets that comprise a larger part of your portfolio. So in this example, the duration of the portfolio would be 8.111. You do it the exact same way for modified duration. It's simply going to be a weighted average of the modified durations of the assets in your portfolio. So you would do it that exact same way there. So that'll give you a portfolio. Now, how do you deal with that if you have liabilities? Well, that's interesting, and that's going to be very important to us, that assets have positive weights, whereas liabilities will have negative weights. And you want to remember that an asset and a liability are the exact same thing, just viewed at from opposite sides. For example, every single bond is both an asset and a liability. If you own the bond where you are going to be receiving the cash flows, well, for you, it's an asset. But if you are the one who borrowed the money where you are the issuer of the bond and you're paying out those cash flows, then for you, it's going to be a liability. So for the person who owns the bond, it's an asset. For the person who issued the bond, it's a liability. And every single fixed income instrument is both an asset and a liability. It's an asset to one party who's receiving the cash flows, and it's a liability to the other party who is paying out the cash flows. So that's important in terms of calculating durations of portfolios, because you will have oftentimes you'll have both assets and liabilities in your portfolios. So you have to put a positive weighting on the assets and a negative weighting on the liabilities. Okay, now we're going to start looking at, now that we know how to calculate the duration and the modified duration for a portfolio, we need to take a look at how do we hedge interest rate risk. Remember, interest rate risk is the risk that the value of our portfolio will go down when interest rates go up and it will go up when interest rates go down. Now, we usually like it when the value of our portfolio goes up, but it's risk because it can move up and down. Anything that can move up and down, that is risk. It's called interest rate risk because it's changes in interest rates that will cause changes to the value of our portfolio. We're going to look at how to hedge from two different perspectives, two different types of hedges. We're going to look at what's called a neutral hedge, and we're going to take a look at immunization. And at this point, you might want to be looking along in your notes that are titled Hedging Interest Rate Risk for a Portfolio. We're on the first page of that now. So a neutral hedge is concerned about hedging the market value currently. In other words, a neutral hedge has things set up so that if interest rates go up, or if interest rates go down, the value of your portfolio stays right where it is. Now, we know that, if interest rates go up, the value of a bond goes down. If interest rates go down, the value of a bond goes up. But we're going to see how to create a neutral hedge. A neutral hedge means whether interest rates go up or whether interest rates go down, the value of your portfolio stays right where it is. That's a neutral hedge. Now, that is a similar concept, but it's not the same thing as what we call immunization. Immunization is making sure that you're going to have a certain amount of money that you have predetermined available to you at a certain point in time in the future. For example, let's suppose that you are running some sort of a pension plan, and you know that you have a $20 million cash outflow that's going to occur in 10 years. So you say, hey, I want to make sure that I have $20 million in 10 years, no matter what happens to interest rates over the next 10 years. So over the next 10 years, interest rates could go up, interest rates could go down, but no matter what happens to them, I want to have $20 million in 10 years. And we got to remember that we need to look at how changes in interest rates will not only affect the value of my assets and liabilities, but it'll also affect reinvestment risk, right? If I've got a bond that is paying off coupon payments, and my plan is to reinvest those coupon payments along the way, what happens to interest rates during that period of time is going to affect at what rate I can reinvest those coupon payments. So I need to be concerned with that for my immunization. So how you hedge a portfolio, either due to a neutral hedge or due to immunization, okay, can be done can be done fairly simply if we make a few assumptions. Okay, I'm going to help me out here. I'm going to bring up the notes that we have on this so that I can be able to show it to you. All right. The first thing is that we're going to make the assumption of what we call parallel shifts in the yield curve. Parallel shifts in the yield curve mean that if long-term interest rates go up by 1%, short-term interest rates go up by 1%. So, and medium-term interest rates go up by 1%. That if we remember, the yield curve is going to be, here are the rates of short-term bonds, here are the rates of long-term bonds. So if you got an upward sloping yield curve, it looks like this. Parallel shifts means the whole yield curve is shifting up, or the whole yield curve is shifting down by the same amount. The slope is not changing. If we have an increase in long-term rates and a decrease in short-term rates, that is a steepening of the yield curve. If you have a decrease in long-term rates and an increase in short-term rates, that's a flattening of the yield curve. Well, we're going to make the assumption, and this is a reasonable assumption. I'll explain why in a minute, that we have only parallel shifts in the yield curve, that the yield curve maintains its current shape, whatever that shape is, and it moves up and it moves down in parallel fashion. Now, the reason why that's a reasonable assumption, not because that's exactly what happens, but because typically we do not need to completely hedge interest rate risk. A complete hedge of interest rate risk means that for a neutral hedge, the value of my portfolio won't change by 1 penny. If interest rates go up or interest rates go down, it won't change by a penny. Well, that's usually not necessary if we have a large portfolio and we're maybe worried about it changing by value of 5% or 4% or something like that. But if it changes by 1/100th of a percent, that's not a big deal. That's not going to be a problem for us. So oftentimes the changes in the yield curve, if they're not exactly parallel, it means we're not going to be completely hedged, but we're probably not going to be that far off of it. Also, typically, movements in the yield curve tend to be small at times. The same thing would be true in terms of immunization. So if you do not want to make that assumption, we can do something called calculating key rate duration, where you figure out different durations for different points along the yield curve. It's a little bit more complex. We're not going to hold you responsible for that. But there are things that you can do in that situation. But we're going to see how to immunize the portfolio and how to create a neutral hedge if we start with that assumption that we will only have parallel shifts in the yield curve. And the way you do it is you create it so that the modified duration of your portfolio is equal to 0. That's all you got to do. Make the modified duration of your portfolio equal to 0. Because if remember, modified duration tells you percentage-wise how much will your portfolio's value go down if there is a 1% increase in interest rates, and how much it will go up if there is a 1% decrease in interest rates. Well, if the modified duration is 0, that's telling you that if interest rates go up by 1%, the value of portfolio is going down by 0%. And if interest rates go down by 1%, the value of your portfolio is going up by 0%. So creating a modified duration of 0 will do that. And how do you create a modified duration of your portfolio of equal to 0? Well, basically, if you have approximately the same market value of your assets as you do your liabilities, you set it so that the modified duration of your assets equals the modified duration of your liabilities. Remember that your assets are going to have positive weights and your liabilities are going to have negative weights. So if they are approximately the same in terms of their market value, if you set the modified duration of your assets to be equal to the modified duration of your liabilities, then when interest rates change, your assets and your liabilities will change together. So if your assets go up in value, which is a good thing, and at the same time your liabilities go up in value, which is not a good thing, they're going to counterbalance each other. If, on the other hand, your assets go down in value, which is a bad thing, your liabilities will go down in value by an equal amount to offset that amount. So creating a modified duration of my portfolio equal to 0 will create a hedge. It'll create a neutral hedge and it will immunize both. The easiest way to do that is to set, and again, this is if your assets and liabilities are approximately the same in terms of their market value, set so that the modified duration of your assets equals the modified duration of your liabilities. One further thing we want to take a look at here, and that is we can simplify it even further. If we want to make the assumption that in addition to having only parallel shifts of the yield curve, if we want to make an assumption that the yield curve is flat and will only move in parallel shifts, then we can get away with not just setting up the modified duration of my portfolio to be equal to 0, but we can set just the duration of my portfolio equal to 0. And frankly, this is what most practitioners do. Unless you really need to be precise on this thing. You set it up so that the duration of your assets is equal to the duration of your liabilities. Now, as I said, technically, this will only work exactly if we have the same market value of our assets as we do our liabilities, if the yield curve is flat, and if it will only move in parallel shifts. So long-term interest rates are equal to short-term interest rates. If that is true, if all the interest rates are the same, long-term, intermediate, and short-term interest rates, if they're about the same, you don't need to worry about modified duration. You just worry about duration. Because remember, modified duration is duration divided by 1 plus R. Well, if R is the same everywhere, then it kind of just cancels out then, and you don't need to be concerned about it. So we're going to go ahead and make that assumption, okay? At least we've got an exercise that you'll be doing where you'll need to make that assumption, that or you'll be allowed to make that assumption, that the yield curve is flat and it will only move in parallel directions. So that's the simplest way to hedge against interest rate risk for your portfolio. We're going to, in our next video, take a look at how to practically go about doing that and what kind of instruments can we use to make those hedges.